Before we begin, I would like to give each candidate 2 minutes to introduce themselves and briefly share why they are running and what do they stand for. Starting with Councilman Blair.
I wish my name was Zebra. I always seem to have to go first, but that's okay. And I want to thank Sandy, YCCA, Steve, thank you, and the resort, and thank you, Cap. I was a little unsure whether I should come tonight or not because they're all developers and contractors, but I made the decision to show up. Thank you for being the pillar of our community. I'm running for city council once again because I believe I have the knowledge of the past, what's going on in the present, and the vision for the future. As a born and raised native in Prescott, Arizona, which I am the only one on this stage that was born and raised here. My mom claims that they shuffled the names when I was born, but that's not true. But anyhow, I'm here because I love the community. And this is the community that I raised my kids in. This is the community that I've had business in, not only one, but two. One for 43 years and one for 42 years. So I've been very successful in what I've done, and I'm proud of that. I'm here to continue what I've started. My degree is at ASU. I graduated from Yapa College, played baseball there, went to the national tournament in 1977, went to Arizona State University, broke my ankle playing baseball down there, went to Oklahoma State University, figured it was too cold for me to survive, so I came back and was a fifth-year senior at Arizona State University with a degree in landscape architecture. I was a park designer and also a degree in education and a minor in psychology. I decided to go back to work for the family business, and that's where I have been. But before I left there, I worked for the state of Arizona and the city of Prescott and designed and built Goldwater Lake. So that's one of my passions. I designed and helped build Granite Creek Park, Phase 1. This town means a lot to me. I appreciate you being here. I know you could be home watching something fun on TV, but I'm glad you're here and interested in who is here to pick up the ball and help this community do what it does. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Phil Good. I'm currently in my 4th year as a city councilman here in Prescott. Prior to that, I served for 2 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission and also was elected to the Central Yavapai Hospital District Board of Directors. I'm a combat veteran from Vietnam. I've been here in Prescott for quite a number of years now and have always been involved in our veteran service organizations where I've held leadership positions with the Veterans of Foreign Wars and also the American Legion, in addition to being members of the Disabled American Veterans and the Vietnam Veterans of America. So I've been studying water resource management with the Citizens Water Advocacy Group for over 4 years. And I'm running for mayor because I really want to make sure that this community that we've all grown to love and respect because of its small town, slow, friendly atmosphere can be maintained that way. I'm seeing a very disturbing amount of accelerating growth here that needs to be slowed down so that it doesn't overwhelm our city with our resources, public safety, and our other services. So I've decided to try to impact that in a way that's positive for everyone. I have a degree in biological sciences and have worked for over 30 years in the healthcare industry prior to retirement and moving here. So I think I have the experience and the expertise and the education to be able to lead the city in a future that we all can enjoy and respect. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Thank you for hosting this event. I just want a fun fact. Everyone liked all the questions, right? All their mixing it up, and none of us knew about it ahead of time. And who all watched the videos? Did anybody watch the videos on YCCA? Okay, Sandy only let us have one take. So I want everybody to know that. We only got one take on those videos. So I appreciate everybody's patience and everybody watching them and being involved. My name is Jessica Hall, and I want to serve on the Prescott City Council. I love Prescott. I love Prescott, excuse me. I love Prescott, and I am very happy and proud to be raising my family here. My husband Jeff and I have been here for over 2 decades, and I am very proud to call it home. I would like to serve on the Prescott City Council by being a voice for a strong strategic plan for economic development, fiscal responsibility, and a council member who is citizen-focused and ready to listen. With my background as a CPA and a mother of 2 boys, I know that I am prepared to serve on the Prescott City Council. I know what it takes to run a successful small business while raising a family in our community, which I think is a very important perspective that our council needs. I was born in Arizona, so I know firsthand the explosive growth that we have seen. I know that Prescott has seen it in particular as well, too. As a councilwoman, one of my primary objectives would be our economic development. I went to school up here, and a lot of my friends didn't stay or return to Prescott because they were unable to start their careers here or even afford housing. I would like to work with the city, use my background in education and business to help create better programs and more opportunities for our businesses to open and expand in Prescott. Our economic development plan should entice small businesses to provide more better paying jobs and more opportunities for our working families, which will in turn provide more goods and services for the citizens of Prescott. Thank you all so much. I would greatly appreciate your vote on August 3rd, and you can learn more about me at jessicahallaz.com. Thank you.
Does my microphone work? Thank you. I would again like to serve on the Prescott City Council. My name is Jim Lamerson. I've lived in Prescott for 42 years. I'm married to my wife, Ann. Prescott is the only community, both having been brought up as military children, that we chose to live in. We found a quaint little library in upstate New York, and we picked a place because of who Prescott was at that time. And we loved Prescott. We loved it when we moved here, and we still love Prescott. I have a jewelry store in downtown Prescott. I followed my dream to be an entrepreneur and to do my own thing in downtown Prescott. Prescott's been very good to me, as has been the entire greater Prescott area. And I think we all know that it's not just about Prescott. We have interrelationships, and those interrelationships involve Prescott Valley. Half my customers are out of Prescott Valley, in Chino Valley, and Yavapai County. And what we do here in Prescott, where it all began, affects all of the greater Prescott area. I think that I have experience. I think I have knowledge. I was the chairman of the board of the Prescott Chamber of Commerce a couple of times. I was the president of the Rotary Club of Prescott a couple of times. I served on our city council for 16 years, and I think I can help. I helped draft the general plan that the people in the city of Prescott have approved several times, 4 if I'm not mistaken. I think that we can move forward judiciously. We can help with economic development judiciously. I am not an anti-growth person. I think if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think there's things that you can do to mitigate how fast you grow and how smart you grow. And I would appreciate your vote, and I will be available at any time to anybody. I'm right there on Cortez Street in Prescott, downtown Prescott, and if you have any questions of me, I'm easy to touch. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone out tonight. My name is Greg MENGARELLI, Mayor of the City of Prescott, and I am running for re-election. Sheila and I moved here 26 years ago and found a city that we absolutely fell in love with. We loved all the values that were present in the city that really matched our values: conservatism, hard work, pragmatism, love of the land, and respect for one another, and very welcoming. And we loved all those things and have enjoyed raising our 9 children, still raising our children here in the city of Prescott. We have 5 teenagers. So pray for us, please. But, you know, I think it's important to just know that I'm invested in and understand and am connected to our city. By running a business for 26 years here in Prescott, I know what it takes to do that. I know what it takes to meet a payroll. I know what it's like to have kids in the public school system here locally, and I love and understand our Western heritage and traditions. And so I think those things are important to remember when you're looking at someone to be your mayor. I look at what we've been able to do in just 3.5 years with the airport, with commercial air service, with a brand new airport terminal. Hopefully you've been out there. With the Hilton Garden Inn and improving that area, especially the splash pad, and the Granite Creek Corridor and the work we're doing there to improve downtown and paying off our PSPRS unfunded liability. We're very proud of that. And moving into a new city hall, and hopefully next month, saving the Dell. So very excited about that development. So if you want more information, go to votemayor.com. I want to thank you all for being here and informing yourselves, and thank you to Sandy and the crew for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brandon Montoya. I've lived here in Prescott since I was 11. So contrary to what you might think, that's been 25 years. I love Prescott like I think everyone on this stage does, frankly, and probably everybody in this room. And so I want to say thank you to Sandy and all the different organizations for pulling this together. I'm a real big believer in civic engagement, so I'm really excited that all of you are here. I think the turnout here speaks a lot about Prescott, that we're all engaged and we want to hear about what's going on in this election. A little bit about me. Like I said, I've lived here since I was 11, went to Mile High Middle School, graduated Prescott High School, class of 2003. I think Grant was a couple years before me. And have worked here most of my adult life. In 2016, my wife and I started a business that we own called Montoya Wealth Management. We're a fee-only fiduciary investment firm, and our office is on Willow Creek Road. And I was really intentional when we set up that business in being a fiduciary. And I think being a fiduciary is a really important thing. And to me, that means avoiding conflicts of interest with my clients and looking out for what's in their best interest. And I see a straight parallel to that and public service. I think it's important for public servants to avoid conflicts of interest. I think it's important for them to have servant leadership. I think it's important for them to act in the best interest of their community. And I'll be frank, I'm worried about the direction Prescott has gone in the last 4 years. I am not an anti-growther. I don't think probably anyone on this stage is anti-growth. But I will say that the rate at which we are growing is alarming to me. And you can tell because of the impact it's having on our resources, the impact it's having on our water, the impact it's having on our infrastructure. And I think we need to be more conservative about how we manage our growth. And I think that directly goes into water. And I think that in spite of what others may think, that our water resources are a lot more limited. So anyways, I will stop now. My name is Brandon Montoya. You can learn more at brandonmontoya.com.
Thank you. My name is Eric Moore, also known as Jay. I get called Jay all the time because I own Jay's Bird Barn and Hallmark and Arizona Field Optics here in Prescott. So I'm a small business owner. I moved to Arizona in 1965, and I have been in Prescott since 1991 for 30 years now. My wife and I raised our 6 children here in Prescott. They all went through the public school system, and we have loved living in this community. As you might know from my writing my newspaper column about wild birds every week for 18 years, I'm a naturalist. I love nature. I love the outdoors. And the question was asked by Steve, why are you running and what do you stand for? I'm running because I am a concerned citizen. As a naturalist, I see the type of growth that is occurring, especially in the deep well area with the mass grading, and I feel that this type of development is unsustainable and unhealthy for our community. It doesn't respect the land. It doesn't respect our heritage as a rural community, and I think we need to slow growth down. I am not anti-growth, but we need to slow the growth down, and we need to protect our water resources. So that's what I stand for. I've never run for public office before. This is my first time as a candidate. And I would like to say that I'm running because I'm a concerned citizen, and I hope that resonates with you. I've not been in office for 20 years or something like that. This is my first attempt, and I'd like to see if I can't help make a change in the direction of our community. I have a degree in business management, and I have previous municipal government experience as an employee. I worked for the town of Chino Valley a long time ago over parks, recreation, library, and senior center and grant writing. So I do have municipal government experience, which I think will be helpful if I'm elected to city council. I encourage you to learn more about my platform by visiting my website, Eric Moore, and the number 4, Eric Moore for city council. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Grant QUEZADA. I'm from Prescott. My wife and I, who's sitting right over there, we've known each other since second grade. We've been married about 15 years. We have 3 kids. I took off after high school, moved to Missouri, worked there for a couple years, and then joined the military. So I spent about 8 years in the special operations community and several deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and then moved back 2014, where my wife and I started John Hancock Barbershop downtown while I was still working at a salon here in town. So a huge swing from military to hairdressing and then barbering. But with that said, throughout owning John Hancock and the amount of growth that we have had over the last 6 years, which now leads to Founding Fathers Collective downtown, which is about 7 different businesses, and we employ about 70 as of this week. 10% of that is military veterans within the community, and I've been very fortunate to see a lot of interesting people over the last 6 years sit in my chair and discuss and talk about what is actually going on in Prescott, from concerned citizens to public officials working here and supporting our community. I think growth is always going to happen. We all know that. We live in a very desirable place here in Prescott. Everybody wants to come here. I wish that we would stop hitting top 1 lists across the country. Maybe that would slow it a little down. But in saying that, a bigger issue for me personally, as we continue to grow, what does it look like to actually hand over this community in perpetuity to our kids, our grandkids, and how do we grow without losing who we actually are as citizens of this community? You are all sitting here, and collectively we're all leaders at some level here within our community. You took the time tonight to be here, and I appreciate that, but we need to grow. As we grow, we cannot lose who we actually are, our values, our morals, our ethics. We need to maintain why people moved here in the first place and be the friendly neighborhood that we all know. I got to stop now. Grant for Prescott.com. Thanks.
Thank you. And now let's begin round 1. Councilman Blair, one of the biggest perceived issues in our area is water. Share with the community your position on if you feel we have a water crisis and any thoughts on importation.
Well, this is a subject that needs more than a minute or two.
You have 2 minutes.
I've been on every water committee in the last 20 years, from the state level to the city level. I have looked at all the different things that are out there. I have met with developers and asked them if they would put downspouts, catchment basins on their roofs. That was done. It was put out there in what everybody's calling Deep Well Ranch. We have worked on conservation. We have done everything we can do as a community. We are using less water now with 20% more growth than we were in 2005. That is replicated to the fact that we have a great water conservation program, a tiered water use program. If you overuse the water, you pay for the water. We right now, based upon our consultants, and everybody wants to laugh about consultants and how we shouldn't rely on them, that by time Prescott is at total build-out, we will still have over 2,000 acre-feet of water left. That's not paper water. The people from SRP and the folks from USGS a long time ago did surveys to understand exactly how much the water in the Little Chino could provide to the city of Prescott. The big question is, when you start talking about growth, and all of you came here from somewhere, I'm sure, and welcome, but I'm there to manage the growth. And if it takes putting water next door to our neighbors to recharge that water and put it back in the aquifer, opposed to septic tanks and wells, that's what I'm going to do. You may call me pro-growth. No, I call it being responsible. When you start looking at all the folks that have been here in Prescott, back in the day, everybody said, boy, Prescott's growing. Every single, oh, I got to stop.
You got to stop now, sir.
Okay.
Ms. Hall, there is much debate on growth in the area. What is your vision for Prescott over the next 4 years?
Well, again, that's another big question for 2 minutes. So Prescott's growing. We've seen it. I've seen it over the last couple of decades. It's been growing. It's Arizona. We have property rights here. We have land ownership here. I think as the city, we are somewhat limited in what we can expect and require of our property owners. However, I think we can work on making it as financially beneficial and what we would like to see within our city limits as possible. A lot of us came to Arizona because of our Arizona land rights, and we don't have as much, oversight and government involved in our day-to-day lives as some other states do. So I think it's a lot of what brought people here. So I think we want to maintain the limitations on how much the government controls private land ownership. That being said, I've worked with a lot of people on different real estate projects here in the area, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to work with people and to figure out if there's a way that we can make it beneficial for Prescott while keeping them included within the city, not just turning people away and them finding a different alternative, because there is alternatives in Prescott and the surrounding areas. So I would say, growth is happening, to sum it up. It's happening, and I think we can do our best to manage it, but I think a priority should also be not impeding on property rights either. So hopefully we can find people that we can work with, that want to work with us, that are wanting to be here in the city of Prescott. Thank you.
Mayor MENGARELLI, recently the Stringfield Ranch failed to get annexed into the city because of the supermajority provision of Prop 400. Does the supermajority provision provided by Prop 400 harm or benefit the ability of the city to manage growth?
Well, Prop 400 is required when you have an annexation of 250 or more acres, which, as Steve mentioned, you need a supermajority, 6 votes on your 7-seat council. There's also other requirements in terms of permanent recharge with any effluent from that development, and a few other things. But to the question of is it good or bad for growth, I think there's great intent behind Prop 400. I think the idea behind it to control growth was very smart with Proposition 400. Unfortunately, with Stringfield Ranch, we had a tremendous deal. We had a private property owner who had 433 units by right in the county without talking to any governmental agency. We had negotiated that deal down to 260 units that would be annexed in the city. So we had reduced the number tremendously. We had lots of amenities with private streets, finishing the circle trail, a parking lot, trailhead, other things as well. We felt like we had a good deal. We didn't get the supermajority vote, and so as a result, the landowner went to the county and negotiated 340 units or 80 more units. So then, it didn't control growth in that case with Stringfield Ranch that just happened recently. And so that's a case where I could point to recently that it really didn't help us control growth, because I thought we had a really good deal with the 260 units on Stringfield Ranch as well as all the other amenities, and it ended up going for 80 more units in the county.
Mr. Lamerson, what basic services need improvement?
Thank you for the question. They all do. To be very candid with you, I think we've done a very good job at managing our basic services, but we're short police. We're short on enforcement on certain traffic things and what's coming into town, et cetera, and it takes bodies. will bodies take money? And the money that we have to supply to police, for example, comes out of the general fund, and that's supported by bed tax and sales tax. Fire. We live in a dry area. Our firemen are called to put their life on the line, on especially like this time of year. You know, we need to take care of those, and we need to make sure that the PSPRS is paid up, that we own our debt, and that we take care of our personnel. Water, sewer, trash. We've got enterprise funds that we can rate charge for those things. And then the roads, with the grace of the people in the city of Prescott, we pass a 1-cent sales tax. So we do have the ability to handle our basic services. But do they all need improving? Well, of course, and they all need to be managed.
Mr. Moore, one of the biggest perceived issues in our area is water. Share with the community your position on if you feel we have a water crisis and any thoughts on importation.
Thank you. I'm glad I get to speak to that. I'm opposed to water importation. I think we should not remove any water from the Big Chino aquifer. I think we have a moral obligation as a community to make sure that the Verde River continues to flow. This is a river that is 2.5 million years old. It's the last free-flowing river in Arizona that's continuing to flow. I had a 2-hour meeting just yesterday with Gary Beverly from CWAG. It was a very insightful meeting with lots of data, evidence, science-based evidence on our water situation. Right now, the Paulden gauge is the lowest it has been in probably over 50 years. I think personally we are at a water crisis, and I don't think we should import water. 86% of the Verde River's flow comes from the Big Chino. If we start pumping the Big Chino, that Verde River will go dry, and it will be a black eye on Prescott, and it will be shameful. And I think we need to have, there's more of a moral issue here. So I think we need to recognize that we are in a long-term drought. I don't think anybody can deny that, and we need to conserve and protect our finite resources. The aquifer is not being recharged at the same rate that we are withdrawing water from the aquifer. We're not in a safe yield. We're overdrafting. And so this is a very precarious situation that needs scientific evidence and scientific-based decision-making. Thank you.
Mr. Quesada, there is much debate on growth in the area. What is your vision for Prescott over the next 4 years?
Yeah, so 4 years, Prescott and the region is going to continue to grow. We can't stop growth. Like everyone believes here and has said, the best thing we can do is manage it. With that in mind, a huge part of that is how do we collaboratively come together and actually work as a community, as citizens, the private and the public sector. We need to partner with the region, Prescott, Prescott Valley, and Chino as we continue to move forward with growth. A huge part of that, though, as well, man, sorry, it's been a long day for me. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Councilman Good, because of its progressive thinking in managing its water, do you think the city should encourage more annexations?
Well, I can say that our growth is accelerating so rapidly over the last 3 years and continues to grow that our ability to manage those current developments is a huge challenge. Adding additional annexed properties will add to that challenge, but it's something that we in the community and the city can do and can do well because of our designation as the only assured water supplier in the Prescott AMA. We were known throughout the state as having one of the most progressive and well-managed water portfolios because of our ability to make sure that we created incentives to conserve. We have and still have tiered water rates so that people who overuse water pay a premium price for it. So those policies need to be extended to potential annexed areas as well. We make sure that our water portfolio is used, and use that effectively to make sure that growth doesn't exceed our ability to provide services for it. So we are dealing obviously with a serious and probably the biggest annexation development agreement with the Arizona Eco Development that this community has ever had to deal with. And we may have to make sure that, those agreements are written in a very strict and enforceable manner so that the future growth doesn't overwhelm our services that we're already seeing right now with some of the residential development that's out in the Deepwell Ranch area. So we do have the capability of doing it as long as we have the will to, and as long as we utilize our ability to allocate water in a way that makes our growth something that we can expect and we can plan for.
Need to stop, sir. Mr. Montoya, what is the city spending too much on and not enough on?
That's a great question. I guess the thing that I would suggest that the city, I guess what I would start with, the city is not spending enough on. I think it's not spending enough on helping do solid business development for smaller businesses in the community. I actually heard Jessica kind of allude to that with that. I'm in the same boat as her. I went to high school here, and I know a lot of people who just can't afford to live here, and they don't have those business opportunities. So I think we need to look at that. I also think that we're probably spending too much money on, I would say, the way we're spending money on how we're fostering development in the community is worrisome to me. And I would say, we need to be more strategic in how we hold developers accountable in that development. I think about some of the PVC pipe problems we've had recently in the area with the water and some of those issues. That worries me, and I want more accountability in government when it comes to how we're spending tax dollars. I also, I worry about how PSPRS, the pay down of that is happening. I think I'm for paying down that unfunded liability as quickly as possible, but I would say that we don't need to use it as backdoor to kind of fill up the coffers of the general fund. We need to pay down that liability as quickly as possible so that we can sunset that tax. A 3/4% tax is a pretty significant sales tax for Prescott, and so I think we need to manage that better.
Now comes the yes/no question, and only a yes/no answer will be accepted. I'm going to start with Councilman Blair and work my way down, okay?
I get beat up all the time here. That's all right.
Should the city be allowed to serve water to customers outside its jurisdictional boundaries?
Yes.
Councilman Good?
No.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Lamerson?
Yes.
Mayor Mengarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Montoya?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Quesada?
Yes.
Okay. That concludes round one. Round two. Councilman Good, do you feel the city has adequate fire and police personnel covering our population?
I think currently we have a sufficient amount of staff for public safety. However, as we continue to grow in the north area, we're going to have to deal with adding personnel because we have to respond to emergencies in a reasonable and quick manner. And as we grow northward, we're going to necessarily need to have staff to be able to respond. That's one of the consequences of growth that's outside city limits or even in areas that we currently don't have police substations or fire stations. So as we grow, we have an obligation to make sure public safety is provided to all those residents, and we respond in a manner that will assure their safety. So with that, that comes from general fund funds and revenue. So we have to make sure that we always have a commercial or residential component to that growth area that generates the sales tax that pay for those services.
Mayor Mengarelli, What do you view as the city's biggest financial challenge, and how would you address it?
Well, I'd point to PSPRS, our unfunded liability. Just back in 2017, we had an $86 million unfunded liability. Unfortunately, we have to use a state-mandated pension fund that we're not allowed to help manage or manipulate how those funds are invested and used. So that's unfortunate, but those are the cards that we were dealt. And so I was very proud to support Proposition 443 back in 2017, which was a 3/4 cent sales tax that would pay down that unfunded liability. Today, that unfunded liability is at $43 million. Still a big chunk, but we're halfway there. I'm certain that we will pay down that unfunded liability before the 10-year sunset of that tax. And so I'm very proud of what we've done on our city council to use all of the money generated by the Proposition 443 that goes directly to pay down that unfunded liability. We've also paid the ARC. And so without that in place, you would not have commercial air service. You would not have a brand new airport terminal, among other things that we've been able to do out of the general fund. Prior to 2017, the city's finances were strangled. And you saw the library was being closed down at times. You had brownouts at your fire stations. You did not have enough firemen at those stations. And so I think Proposition 443, supporting that, was extremely important for all the great benefits that you're starting to see now from the city, getting control of that unfunded liability. Thank you.
Mr. Lamerson, the city has an assured water supply program. Can you explain what this is and why it is important?
Yes. Number one, we're the only assured water provider in the Prescott AMA. That puts us in the catbird seat. We have the authority and the ability to either serve our water in the city or outside of the city, and the AMA, for that matter of fact. The assured water portfolio that we have puts us in the ability to manage growth not only in our city, but outside with whom we have governmental agreements to do so with. So from my perspective, I think that Prescott does an adequate job, but could do a better job in how we distribute our water and those contracts and those agreements that we make. What do the citizens of Prescott get for the use of their water? That's an important issue when you think about what the water's value is. What is coming back to the city of Prescott for the use of our water, whether in the city or outside of the city?
Mr. Montoya, what does the term managed or sustainable growth mean to you? And please do not use the words managed or sustainable in your answer.
I like those rules. So what does managed or sustained growth? I guess for me, I'm a numbers guy. And so if you look at the numbers for the past 4 years, we've been growing at a rate of 4% annually every single year since 2018. And the general plan for Prescott calls for 1 to 2% growth. And I'll tell you, when I've talked to other people in municipalities across the country, and even here locally in Arizona, they will tell you 1 to 2%. That is the most you really want in a realistic way, because it will tax your resources, it'll tax your infrastructure if you start going above that. And I'll tell you, I've seen that impact in Prescott. So for me, what it means is to be thoughtful and, wait, you said not to say strategic, right? Okay.
Managed or sustainable?
Sustainable. Okay, so I will use the word strategic. I would say it means strategic vision. As everyone has acknowledged tonight, we can't stop growth here in Prescott, and we won't. But we can be very specific about what that growth looks like. We can define the quality of growth, and we can have a bigger say in that growth as a community. And I guess I think about the development that is happening in North Prescott. There are a lot of densely packed homes there, and they are blading the land and just taking all the landscaping out that exists there, the natural habitat. If you look in Prescott, that is not the traditional way the development has happened here. If you look at Timber Ridge, Mountain Club, these communities, you see that they've incorporated the natural components of the landscape there to give a quality development. And I think we can demand that of development here, and I think we can be strategic in our vision about it.
Councilman Blair, what is the most urgent issue facing the city? And if elected or re-elected, what would you do about it?
To me, the most urgent issue is sewer. And I know that's a subject nobody wants to touch. I've been working on it for 20 years. And to take the over 4,000 homes that are on septic tanks off the system, bring that water back to our cleaning system out at the airport is the most important thing we can do. Hokegan off of Willow Creek Road, years and years ago, I always say BS, and everybody wants to say, what's that mean? I say, that's before Steve. So before me, the city of Prescott willingly gave water to the county to Ukashpa. You have over 500 houses over 50 and 60 years ago that are still using septic systems that are leaching into Willow Creek and polluting our lakes. Recreation is important to me. I want to see the lakes clean up. I want to see sewer, septic tanks gone, and that way we can recharge all that water to the aquifer for permanent recharge. Right now it's running down the creeks. We did a study on it. There's E. coli in those creeks. There's E. coli in our lakes, and we need to clean it up. And that is, to me, if you're going to be an ecotourism outlet, we need to make sure we can use our lakes the way we want to. And by the way, ecotourism is great for the city of Prescott. 20 years ago, we had 1 mile of trail. Now we have 118 miles of trails. That didn't happen by somebody just grabbing a shovel and say, let's go build them. That happened by the administration that thought that was the right thing to do for the community. So that's my comments. Thanks.
Ms. Hall, one of the biggest perceived issues in our area is water. Share with the community your position on if you feel we have a water crisis and any thoughts on importation.
Water crisis, I prefer not to use crisis. I don't think we're quite there yet. I know we have the allotted amount that we get from the state. I do feel like our council has been consistent in how we've been handling that. I think we have done it on a conservative manner. Given that we are the assured water holder, we have the upper hand. We really do. We have the upper hand on who we're providing water to, and negotiating those terms, whether it's with adjoining cities, adjoining towns. But then as the development happens, water rights are tied to the property as well. So, like I said, again, we have to work with people that are coming in and building homes, wells and septics. Obviously, that's another issue that we are facing. It's still happening within city limits. So the more that we can control it, more that we can put into place, these new builds. One of the things that I know is happening is, requirements for efficiency. A lot of the newer houses do have efficiency requirements, so they are installing things that make it better, which I'm assuming is one of the reasons that we have less water usage as well. People trying to make improvements on some of the older homes that we have here, which unfortunately can have the effect of being inefficient. So no, I wouldn't use the term crisis. Again, it does need to be managed. It does need to be overseen as the whole of the state. Actually, it's Arizona in general has we are the desert, right? So we don't have near as many natural water resources as some of our neighbors do. Thank you.
Mr. Moore, what does the term managed or sustainable growth mean to you? And please do not use the words managed or sustainable in your answer.
Thank you, Steve. To me, it means a rate of growth that does not outstrip our natural resources, that is not harmful to our natural resources, that respects our land, and that does not overburden the city in terms of infrastructure and public safety, police, fire, and other goods and services that the city is required to provide, such as sanitation, sewer, obviously, water, trash, recycling, street repairs. Steve spoke to the issue of the septic tanks, and that is an issue for our city. And I think before we start looking at being a water provider outside of our city, we should start looking at taking care of what's going on in our city, such as correcting the issue with septics, and that we need to find a solution that is bearable to the residents so that it is not a burden to them. We're willing to spend millions and millions of dollars outside of our city limits. Let's spend millions of dollars inside our city limits. Thank you.
Mr. Quesada, what is the city's biggest economic development opportunity?
I think one of the biggest economic development opportunities we have currently right now is the entire development of the Granite Creek Corridor. So that's about a 1.4 mile stretch right downtown that can the city is currently working on with a couple local engineering teams, a team out of Flagstaff, some architectural teams out of the Valley. But that's a massive driver to tourism within our community. It will clean up that entire corridor. It helps clean up and alleviate a lot of the issues that you have with the transient or homeless population that kind of conjugates down there. So that right there would be a massive added value to not only us as the citizens of Prescott, but obviously to the tourist dollars that are being spent here on a daily basis.
Councilman Good, given area municipality declarations, what are your thoughts on limiting residential building permits?
Well, I would not stop growth, and I would not stop the ability for development of building permits, especially in small areas. I monitor building permit applications on a monthly basis, and I watch these very closely. So not only do we have them in Prescott, Prescott Valley, the unincorporated Yavapai County, Chino Valley, etc. And we are seeing such a rapid increase in building permit requests that we have a really tough time even to deal with them. But I'd like to see building within the city limits. I've advocated for infill development. I helped the city put together a cleanup program in the Dexter neighborhoods so that we could get a lot of those lower income areas cleaned up. And because of that, we're attracting much more development in smaller apartment buildings, et cetera. We've got a new apartment building that just opened up on First Street. We have another one that about a year ago, maybe less, was about 10 or 12 units on Hillside. We've got another one that just recently opened up on Valley Street. We also have another one on Whipple. You add all those together, you got 50 or 60 units that are all within the city limits so that we can provide police and fire protection, all the services without having to increase staff, etc. So those are the kinds of permits I like to support and not have to necessarily deal with these very large building proposals in North Prescott or outside city limits. So those are the kinds of permits that we should support and are beneficial to the community at large. Thank you.
Mayor MENGARELLI, because of its progressive thinking in managing its water, do you think the city should encourage more annexations?
Well, I think it's important to look at each annexation and see what the benefits are for the city of Prescott. And so each one has to be determined on its own merit. I think in the case of Arizona Eco Development, we have a tremendous opportunity because we're receiving 474 acres around the Point of Rocks. We're also receiving 270 acres on the end of the runway, plus another 130 that we could do in a friendly condemnation. We have lots of trail connectivity. We have lots of easements for future trails. There are tremendous upside for the city of Prescott in that annexation. So again, I think you look at each one individually. I think in the case of Arizona Eco Development, this would be a tremendous opportunity for us. I also think that Stringfield Ranch would have been a great annexation. In that case, when it wasn't annexed, we went ahead and looked at doing water there through an IGA because we want to protect the aquifer. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about water outside the city. You think that if you just say no to water outside the city that growth doesn't happen. It's not true. Growth will happen in the county, and then what you're up against are wells and septic systems. And unmetered wells, people can run as much water out there as they want into a septic system, which then doesn't recharge the aquifer. So that's why fundamentally I support water outside the city, because it preserves our aquifer, because we're providing water under our conservation code, under our plant palette, under all those very strict water conservation codes, and then we get to take that effluent from that water system, even in the county, and it returns back to our aquifer. Many times, 80 or 90% of the water delivered to a home in the county with our water returns to our aquifer.
Now comes the yes/no question, and for this round, I'm going to start at the opposite end of the stage and work our way down to Councilman Blair. So, Mr. Quesada, do you feel the quality of life in Prescott is being threatened by growth? Yes or no?
No.
Yes. Yes.
No.
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 Yes.
Absolutely no.
Round number 3. Mr. Montoya, one of the biggest perceived issues in our area is water. Share with the community your position on if you feel we have a water crisis, and any thoughts on importation.
I had a feeling I was going to. Okay, I had a feeling I was going to get this question. So I would say yes, we do have a water crisis here, and the fact of the matter is we've been out of safe yield since 1998, and that means we're taking more water out of the ground than we're putting back, and that's a problem. And I think the challenge that exists is that we can't solve that problem alone in Prescott, and so, you know, some of the existing members on council have pointed out that Prescott has really good conservation. And that's true. We do have really good conservation. But I would argue that our conservation program is ad hoc at best. And what we actually need is a strategic vision and a strategic plan to get water conservation done. And what that would look like to me is setting goals and checking in to make sure we're achieving those goals. And if we're not, asking hard questions about what we can do better. So that's how I built a successful business. I think that's the way we can manage the water issue in a better way. But beyond even that, we need to reach out to our regional partners. We need to talk to Prescott Valley, we need to talk to the county, we need to talk to Chino, and we need to re-engage. You know, Prescott is the assured water supplier here. We can bring these folks to the table and say, hey, let's make this a win-win for Prescott Valley, for Prescott, for Chino Valley, for the county. And so that would be my suggestion, is that we are not doing that now, you know, and we need to re-engage those partners in the community so that we can achieve safe yield. You know, other communities have achieved safe yield. Tucson's done it, Albuquerque's done it. It's not a pipe dream to do it. We can do it, but we have to want it, and we have to engage in our regional partners to make it happen.
Councilman Blair, what does the term managed or sustainable growth mean to you? Please do not use managed or sustainable in your answer.
Well, I think we manage it quite well. So when you look at what we've done in our community, which a lot of people don't know, that we have a sewer plant out by the airport that has now been built to handle the maximum inflow of sewage at total build out of the city of Prescott. When you start talking about services and managing, we also have doubled the size of every water tank in the city of Prescott. That's managing. When you start talking about the future of Prescott and what you're doing as far as managing growth, you know, you need to understand that we have the Forest Service on 3 sides, the tribal lands on one side. We have Chino Valley on one side, and we have Prescott Valley on the other side. We have one annexation left. That's AED. We want to manage that facility to bring in the water that we provide, to know they're going to provide police and fire stations, parks. I looked at Prescott Lakes when they were built, and I walked it with the developers, bad word. But that's a fine development. And it was managed, and it looks great. And a lot of you folks in here might live there. So who am I to tell people what they like or don't like when it comes to housing opportunities? That is driven by the market, and we are here to do the right thing in the community by providing services that will make sure that we're not outstripping our water. There's no way that we can control water. Do you realize that we have over 12,000 exempt wells in Yavapai County? We have over 3,000 exempt wells in Paulden. Are they managing their growth? I don't think so. We manage our growth through services. If we didn't have good services with police and fire in our downtown in Prescott, Arizona, we wouldn't have any of you here because we didn't manage our growth. So is it important to me? You bet. Do I support growth? I support it in a manner based upon being done.
Ms. Hall, what basic services need improvement?
Well, one of the concerns that I see is obviously, you know, we've been talking about growth, not managed or sustained growth, but growth. Our police and fire, they need to be supported by us. They need to be supported by the city. I understand if we have all the staff we need today, right? We've got, if there not anybody that needs to be hired today, but I don't believe that to be the case. I believe that we need to bring on these people as we predict we are going to grow. We don't want to have a giant surplus of people come in and then all first-year rookies on the police and fire. So I think it's important that we try to look ahead for our staffing needs. Prescott as a blanket has a very difficult time finding staff. We do have an issue with our employment that's provided here. We have an issue with having the right people, having the right expertise and experience, being from our small town and coming here. So I think if we can start reaching out and spending money ahead of time, knowing that we're going to grow. So once this population gets that much larger, we know that our fire and our police are already prepared, that they're already staffed, they're already trained, and they have all the equipment that they need. Thank you.
Councilman Good, recently, the Stringfield Ranch failed to get annexed into the city because of the supermajority provision of Prop 400. Does the supermajority provision provided by Prop 400 harm or benefit the ability of the city to manage growth?
Well, I don't think it's up to me to decide that. The public voted for this. The citizens voted for this. I respect the votes of the citizen. The citizens voted in the general plan overwhelmingly to define what our borders would be to expand annexations with the city. Stringfield Ranch was outside of those borders. If the general plan defines where they are, we have to respect that. And if Proposition 400 requires a supermajority, I think that's a nice regulator on how much annexation and growth can be allowed without the public's approval of it. There were many problems with that annexation. We didn't have a direct definition of where the border was contiguous with the city. It was separated by a parcel that's owned by the State Land Trust that they're still trying to work on the developer's approval to get an easement across that so he can develop into the Stringfield Ranch itself. One of the other things is that concerned me deeply about that is if we did annex, we have to provide police and fire protection, and we had a long reach to be able to do that. So if we did it, how do we pay for it? It's going to be up to you, the taxpayers, to have to add more police and fire to be able to go into that area. And that means bigger government, more taxes. And if you know anything about me, I'm a conservative and I believe in limited government, low taxes. And gosh darn it, it better be damn justified before I say yes. Thanks.
Mr. Quesada, The city has an assured water supply program. Can you explain what this is and why is it important?
Currently, no, I cannot. So obviously, I have some stuff to look at.
Mr. Lamerson, there is much debate on growth in the area. What is your vision for Prescott over the next 4 years?
Maintaining a steady rate commensurate to our ability to provide the basic services that the population here demand.
Mr. Moore, what is the most urgent issue facing the city, and if elected, what would you do about it?
I think the most urgent issue facing the city is unbridled growth. I think it's the type of growth that is occurring. I've said this in public settings before. When you see the mass grading that is occurring out on North Willow Creek Road, to me that is not acceptable. That is not the Prescott way. Can you imagine if the developer that developed Timber Ridge 30 years ago mass graded that area to develop Timber Ridge or Hazley or Hidden Valley or Forest Trail? Why do we tolerate what's happening now when we haven't in the past? We need to preserve and protect the city of Prescott. And this unparalleled growth is going to affect other things such as our infrastructure, our roads, our transportation. We only have one road in the city of Prescott that is a north-south corridor, and that's Willow Creek Road. Highway 89 is a state highway. It's not controlled by the city. And Williamson Valley, which is north-south, is in the county. We have one road into the city for all of the north-south traffic. And if you've been in the area around Sandretto and Willow Lake Road and that intersection, you know the gridlock that we're already experiencing at our current population. It's not sustainable. And I think that's the most urgent issue that we need to address right now.
Mayor MENGARELLI, do you feel the city has adequate fire and police personnel covering our population?
So currently, I would say we have a very minimal coverage right now with police and fire. We recently, we're in the midst of passing a budget with new positions, about 3 new positions on fire. And so I think that will help us. What we see happening, particularly with fire, is you see a spike in calls during the day, particularly downtown. And so we're running large fire trucks around downtown for medical calls primarily during the middle of the day. And so with these 3 new positions, I really do think it will help tremendously in the downtown area with those medical calls. And so I think with those new positions, that will help us have much better coverage. I think what's more important to think about here is on the north end of town, we only have the one fire station right at the airport. And with the growth in that area, it's really critical that we have another fire station on the north end of town to have shorter response times near that population center up north. And so I think some of it is a staffing issue, which we are addressing in the current budget, as well as in the future, we need to look at a new fire station in that population center.
So now we come into the hidden envelope part. In these envelopes, there is one word, and I originally was going to give you 1 minute to speak on that word, but you're doing so well with time, I'm going to give you 2. So I'm going to hand out these envelopes. Do not open them up. We'll start with Councilman Blair and work our way down until it's your turn to speak. Fair enough? Councilman Blair, open your envelope, please.
Dinner. What I'm missing right now. Mine is traffic. And That's a good one for me to talk about. You know, we have SIMPO that oversees the region's road system in Yavapai County and Prescott, Arizona. And we've been working hard on getting roads improved. Right now, we just had a conversation on Tuesday that we're moving into the construction phase here shortly on widening the road in front of the Coca-Cola plant, which is right below the car dealerships, to make that all contiguous all the way up so we don't have a bottleneck. There's other folks that are working on their road system, and I think when you start talking traffic, you got to speak regionally. Yavapai County is working on widening and putting in turn lanes and decel lanes on Williamson Valley Road, which will help as well. You know, people move here, hopefully. You know, I know people are against Depot Ranch and the type of people that want to have those accommodations out there. But the master plan shows commercial. They show population zones out there where people hopefully will shop out there at a grocery store, will do their commerce out there instead of coming into town and jamming up the roads. So when you look at the big picture, the way I do it, I drive when people aren't going to work. We're a commerce center in Prescott, Arizona. A lot of people can't afford to live here because of our housing types and sizes. So they're forced to live in Paulden, Chino Valley, or Prescott Valley. So every morning, every lunch hour, and every night, you'll see people going the opposite direction because that's who we are. We have the courts downtown. We have a lot of great things downtown. Not all that long ago, when I got out of high school, do I remember in 1970s, 80s, downtown Prescott boarded up with plywood. You can talk about all the growth that you want. You can say, where's the magic spoon that's going to make it better? If we throw up a fence around Prescott, they will still come. We advertise for them to come. Our basic services are generated because of sales tax.
Stop, sir. You need to stop.
Thank you.
Councilman Good.
Open space. You know, we have a substantial amount of open space throughout the city, and especially with the ability to eventually have an annexation of the Arizona eco development with a well-planned and well-designed development agreement. Open space provides a welcoming and attractive area to develop and also to enjoy. So I like open space, but I also know that if we buy and expand too much open space, those areas do not generate income for us to provide the services for them. So fortunately, with our policies, we require a substantial amount of open space for every new development, and I think that's very appropriate. So we have to balance between well-planned development and also having enough open space within those developments to not have this really high density, mass-graded problems that we're seeing in the Depot Ranch area, and I think we've learned from that. When I was on Planning and Zoning Commission, I was one of the 3 commissioners who voted no on the Depot Ranch development because it had way too many loopholes and it allowed too much density, and we're certainly seeing the consequences of that today. So we have to learn from that, and we have to do a much better job on the Arizona Eco Development Agreement so that we can balance the open space with the appropriate amount of development that doesn't overwhelm our services. Thank you.
Ms. Hall.
Okay, so attainable housing. I'm assuming you, are we meaning affordable housing? Am I allowed to ask that question to clarify? Attainable housing?
You can answer the question any way you please.
Oh, okay. All right, great. So like I mentioned before, going to school up here, a lot of people I know, even now coming back, can't afford to live here. You know, they can't afford based on what we have in payroll options and what we have in employment options And it goes back to what I would like to focus on and spend a lot of my council time on, which is the economic development. I would love to see businesses here to provide goods and services, but I would also like to see businesses that hire here in Prescott, that don't necessarily outsource their professional staff to people out of Phoenix, and be able to have higher paying jobs up here and more opportunity for people to be able to afford housing up here. You know, whether or not you like the closer developments, unfortunately, some people are priced out of being able to be in a house that's in the city limits. One of the things I've mentioned before, I think it was in my video, the price of housing, I'm hoping that with everything being as competitive as, that the market will be driven by people who want to be in the city limits and are willing to put in the time, the money, and the elbow grease to fix up some of these older properties. We have a lot of things that are downtown that are not even livable. We have properties that are existing assets that aren't new development, but people will be coming here, and I'm hopeful that we'll see some of those things being rehabilitated and an option for people with housing. Oh, all right, thank you.
Mr. Lamerson.
Growth. It's something that I have on my elbow. Okay, you know, I was on the council when we chose to buy the Big Chino Water Ranch. And we chose to buy the Big Chino Water Ranch with one objective, and that was we were declared in groundwater mining. And the only way for us to get out of groundwater mining and to obtain safe yield, which is a stated goal for ADWR, was for us to import water from outside of the AMA inside of the AMA. We had sold the water, going back in history, out of the Colorado River so that Scottsdale could have water. And then we were awarded the affordability to go get water outside of the AMA, and specifically the Big Chino Water Ranch. So to me, what growth means is paying attention to what we can and can't do within the realm of reality. The city of Prescott has a water right in the Big Chino Water Ranch. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to exercise it. What it means is we have that, and we can use that for negotiation. And we can negotiate that water right any way that the city of Prescott chooses to do that. So that's what growth means to me.
Mayor MENGARELLI.
Airport. I've talked a little bit about the airport already, but I'm very proud of what we've done in the last 3.5 years at the airport. Just 8 months into my first term as mayor, we finally have had commercial air service with 50-seat jets, and we were so excited and proud of that moment. We'd only had prop planes prior to that, and kind of our fluctuation in our enplanements had gone up and down, but never really taken off. And so I'm very proud of our commercial air service with United Express that goes 2 trips to Denver and 1 to LA at this point. But more importantly, I think, is the terminal. You know, we didn't have a terminal that we could be proud of. It was a 1940s era terminal. You've probably all been there at one point or another. Very small. We had mobiles that kind of extended off the main terminal. We couldn't have the kind of equipment that you really need for security in those mobiles. And so we'd worked as a city for decades to get a new terminal, and finally, recently, we were able to secure the funding from the FAA. 95% of that is from the FAA, and we have a beautiful airport terminal. But our work's not done out there. The next thing that we need to do, the next major thing, is to lengthen that runway for a few different reasons. We have 7,600 feet of runway right now, actually 7,619. And there's two major reasons why we need to extend that runway. One is for commercial air service during the day when it's really hot, like last week. Because of altitude density, we have a harder time with lift, and we have to limit the number of people on the airplane. And secondly, for our safety with fire, with those tankers that come in and out, it's very important that we have a longer runway to accommodate those airplanes for the safety during fire season.
Mr. Montoya.
Homelessness. I guess I'll start by saying that this is an interesting issue for me because as a child, I experienced homelessness. And I think kind of tying into what Jessica was talking about with affordable housing, we need to think about what our community is going to do to address some of these issues. For me, what that means is making sure Prescott is a community that provides essential services to people who need them. And I think about one of the things that Sheriff Masher brought in as a Yabby County Sheriff here recently, before he retired, he brought in basically a recidivism program to address issues with chronic homelessness and people with mental health issues. And I think that's a good model for Prescott to look at and to say, okay, how can we learn from those best practices, and how can we make sure that we're keeping our community a safe and welcoming community that feels good to live in, and that we're not leaving behind members of our community.
Mr. Moore.
My topic is annexation, and recently I've had a lot of conversations with residents of the city of Prescott, and I've shared with them that I would be very in favor of annexing areas that are currently receiving city goods and services, such as Mountain Club or other areas where it does not involve new growth. There are a lot of areas adjacent to or right in the city that have no say in what happens in the city. Every single day, I have customers in my store saying, I would vote for you if I could, but I can't because I live in the county. And yet they're right off of Iron Springs Road, or they're right off of Copper Basin Road. There are so many little pockets, and if you've ever looked at a map of our city boundaries, it's pretty interesting to look at. And so I would be highly in favor of annexing existing developments that would not create more growth, that would increase our population, which I think would improve our funding at the state level with shared revenues, because these people that aren't in our city's boundaries but are actually in the city are not included in our population, which then affects shared revenue as well. As far as annexation outside of the city, like new developments, I think we need to consider that very carefully, and it needs to be a part of the master plan, and it needs to be part of a strategic vision.
Mr. Quesada.
So my topic is water. Yesterday I had about an hour and a half conversation with a gentleman here in town regarding that, and I've gone to a few meetings at CAP and studying up for CWAG. So to be honest, I know it's a very big issue, and it's not one that is easily addressed or has answers. I know a lot of the times we find ourselves too easily confined to an either-or type of solution, where we put ourselves in a questions and formats where either one side has all the answers and one side has no answers. This is an ongoing issue that needs to be addressed and really solved at the community levels, both public and private, and really at a regional level with Prescott Valley, and Chino working collaboratively together with our developers, our builders, the city, the community, and the citizens. And at this point, outside of coming together as a community in the region, I don't have much of an answer to provide because it is such a massive issue, and that's the reality. So,
For our last series of questions, we're going to go down the line. I'm going to start with Councilman Blair. And each candidate will be allowed to ask a question to anyone on stage, excluding myself. And you can ask multiple candidates the same a question as well, too. Their response to that question will be allotted 2 minutes.
well,
I'm not going to ask Grant about water. So I think I would like to ask my fellow councilman, Phil Good, you know, when you start talking about water and we talk about in the city, outside the city, that's a very visual line that if you cross over this, they're all neighbors to me. And Phil lives in a neighborhood that was annexed in the city by strip annexation that is not legally available to do now in the state of Arizona. Longview Estates is in the city of Prescott, but outside the city of Prescott. I don't treat those folks any different, so I want to know why Phil believes that the Stringfield Ranch was such a bad deal.
Councilman Good, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, in the past, there's been a lot of annexations that didn't apply to Prop 400 because Prop 400 didn't exist. And I still agree with Eric Moore that some of those developments that are outside city limits that already have services and are nearby would be appropriate for annexation. But when it comes to annexing outside city limits, without the ability to be able to provide revenue to be able to service those communities with police and fire and other services, water, roads, etc., it becomes a net drag, a net cost to the community that isn't paid for by anyone but the rest of the taxpayers in the community. I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe in low taxes and limited government. And when you make those kind of decisions, you're expanding government, you're increasing taxes to be able to provide those services. So at some point, you have to have legitimate guidelines, and that's why we have a general plan. And if the general plan and the people in the community want to vote for expanding those annexed areas, then they can do that. We'll have another general plan vote coming up in 2025, but until then, I respect the will of the people. I expect their vote, I respect their votes, and I'll follow that and make sure that the rest of the community doesn't have to pay the price for those extended annexations. Thanks.
Councilman Good, it's your turn to ask anyone on stage a question.
Well, I'll ask Greg Mengarelli regarding the amount of financial and donations that come in from developers and contractors that have such a serious question whether decisions are being made that have influence from those developers. And again, I'm not a negative growther or no growther, but it's up to the public to understand where those conflicts might be. So please answer that.
Mayor Mengarelli, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to answer this question, so thank you. You know, some on this stage demonize, degrade, and devalue a certain group of people in our city, and it's sad to me and unfortunate. We shouldn't discriminate against any sector of our city. I have certain values, I have a certain way of making decisions, and that does not change. I will always have the best interest of Prescott in mind, and I will always make decisions that are based on my values and what I believe is best for the city of Prescott. I will not cancel someone's opportunity to participate in the political process within the bounds of the rules and the laws that apply. I think it's unfortunate that these people that Phil suggests are bad for our city, because they're the ones taking the risk. They're the ones creating the opportunities. They're the ones that provided the development and the home that you live in today. They create jobs. And so I can tell you that I don't take any money under the table. I do not. And I am not negatively influenced by any developer As a matter of fact, you would be surprised at the kinds of conversations I have with these people when we're negotiating. It is difficult at times, and they don't get their way. I always have the best interest of Prescott in mind.
Ms. Hall, you can ask anyone on stage a question.
So high. Okay, sorry. So I have a question for Steve. So
Which Steve?
I was like, wait, I thought that wasn't a choice. Okay, so Steve, you've been on council for 20 years, right? So you've seen a lot of council members come and go, mayors come and go, and a lot of changes. So my question to you would be, do you think it is more important to have another female on council, another CPA, or another female CPA?
Councilman Blair, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I know my wife's watching, so I'm going to walk carefully on this one. No, I absolutely value the females' comments. So we brought in a young lady that's been on council for 4 years, and she was a breath of fresh air. Not all guys look the same way women look at things. Not all women look at the same way guys look at things. And I think that having the communication together for ideas is always positive. Yes, I've seen a lot in our community in the last 20 years. I have the energy to continue to serve. I have seen a lot of people that have wanted to be on city council, females alike. I can think of 4 right now that don't any longer live in the city of Prescott. So what values did they have for our community? They're gone. I'm still here. And I would support a female on council.
Mr. Lamerson, you may ask your question.
Thank you very much. I think I'll ask this of Grant. Grant, being from a military background, I appreciate who you are, what you've done, where you've been, and how many people ever said thank you.
Mr. Quesada, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Hey, you're welcome.
Mayor Mengarelli, you may ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Out of respect for your time, I don't really have a question for anybody on the panel tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Montoya, you may ask your question.
You know, I'm still reeling from the envelope opening situation, so I'm gonna follow Mr. Mengarelli's lead here and say that let's give these people their evening back sooner than later.
Mr. Moore, you may ask your question.
I think this is a very important election, and I think the more important election is probably the mayoral race than the council race. And so I would like to ask Phil Good, what do you see as your primary differences between your opponent that you're running against in the mayoral race? How would you say you separate yourself or you're different from your opponent?
Well, thank you, Eric.
Councilman Good, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I think it's very clear that the decision that and I want to make a point, I am not demonizing or diminishing any developer, any contractor. They all have the ability to participate in the election process. They have rights as voters, etc. But I want to make sure that the community at large trusts our government, that we are making decisions based on the merits of the issues and not have the questions that we may be influenced by significant donations to campaigns. I made it crystal clear that I would not accept donations from developers and contractors. I've received them and I've returned them. Not that I don't appreciate them, it's just that I want the community at large to be able to trust the decisions that are made and trust the policies that we implement so that we make sure the future of the city is based upon its merits. And I think that's a crystal clear choice. Thank you.
Mr. Quesada, you may ask your question.
If I remember correctly, did you say you can ask a question of several individuals or just
One person,
Just
but
one.
anyone on stage.
Okay. Before I ask, then, to not be disingenuous, Jim, thank you very much. I think as a veteran, I am still serving, so I guess it's just duty and service, and so I'm not used to saying much other than, and I know there's several veterans here that feel that way as well, so thank you. So my question is to the mayoral candidates, which now I have to choose one. So what does regional collaboration look like to you, and how do we get there from here? And I'll ask it to Phil.
Councilman Goode, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, I appreciate that, Grant, because, you know, we can do a more laudable job of handling our water portfolio and using that to regulate it and slow down the amount of the pace of growth. But even if we do a great job, even a better job, we really have to rely on our neighbors to work together cooperatively. We're all drawing essentially from the same aquifer or neighboring aquifers. And if we continue to compete to try to find out who gets the most water and who grows the fastest, we're all going to lose. So we need leadership in this area to be able to sit down and come up with some reasonable, agreeable policies so that we can assure our future and not degrade it. So I think leadership is needed in this area, and I'm more than willing to sit down and work with our neighbors, whether it's Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, Dewey, Humboldt, or the county, to start working together so that we all have a future we can rely on. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this now concludes our Prescott Council Candidate Forum. And can we please give our candidates a well round of applause? I would like to thank our sponsors for this evening, Central Arizona Partnership, Yavapai County Contractors Association, Talking Glass Media, and a special shout out to the Yavapai Prescott Indian Tribal Police Department, led by Chief Scott and Sergeant Dan in the back.